caveats to the rules, right? It's different if you've been unvaccinated or if you have a booster, then you have to figure out if you have symptoms or if they're resolving. Generally, it's 1 to 2 days prior, but generally sticks out from there. And it just seems like an SAT logic problem to figure out what you should do and what you should do with employees who are sick. Do you worry that there's a lot of room for mistakes in trying to parse this out?
Well, certainly, I think because it can be hard to identify, what is a symptom even. Certainly, I think that there are, some people that may not recognize certain things as a symptom. I've certainly talked to people who have said, oh, it's just a sore throat. So I think that certainly is one place where the interpretation can be difficult. If we're talking asymptomatic or symptoms resolving, and people may, view that differently. There is a lot of talk about, there should be a negative test required, for instance, before leaving isolation. I think that one difficulty is that those are still limited. So right now, it really is this timing, relying on this time period, and for people to really, I think hard about what might be a symptom and what might not be. And I think go on the side of, if you are feeling, some symptoms, if you do have a fever, even slight, then staying home longer, certainly, and, talking to your healthcare professional if you feel that you're just having a hard time discerning what might be a symptom, what might not.
I mentioned that Airlines for America had asked the CDC to cut quarantine time, and I've also seen that interpreted as something that suggests that these rules are not earnestly given by the CDC. Do you worry about the erosion of trust here?
I think, yes, with confusion and with people feeling that they're being told different things, but I think at the same time, we're always trying to balance, livelihood and people being able to do the things that they need to do in their lives, go to work, care for others with what we know. So the quarantine guidelines have, changed as well, as you noted, where if you've been boosted or if you've been, fully vaccinated recently, so completed the Pfizer, Moderna, and within 6 months, or the J&J within the last 2 months, then, wear a mask for 10 days, test on day 5 if possible. If you develop symptoms, stay home, but otherwise, for people who are boosted or recently fully vaccinated, no quarantine period suggested. Masking for 10 days. And of course, there is the quarantine suggested if you're not boosted, if you're unvaccinated, and that is to stay home for 5 days and wear a mask an additional time. So I do think that it is a big change, and something to really try to pay attention to, these delineations. But I think it also shows the importance and the confidence we have in the booster helping, so that with getting a booster, you actually are able to, cut that quarantine time, at least based on these suggestions now, and wear a mask for 10 days, and then, get tested on day 5. And if you become positive, then of course make decisions based now on having that positive test.
What do you make of how these changes were communicated to the public? I mean, we're in such a high surge right now. It seems like a little bit of whiplash.
There is some confusion about this change happening now, and people do have concerns about, this variant and the surge and what the next few weeks are going to bring. So I think that we do need more communication about where this is coming from, what the science currently is. But the idea being, as I mentioned, this balancing act between people doing the things they need to do kind of in day-to-day life, with what we know about the virus so far. I think that certainly we know that, the vaccine and the booster is giving protection, so people should feel confident, I think, in the changes made around that. And hopefully, even though these are, the guidelines can be a bit confusing, I do think on first read, hopefully it will help to encourage more people to get vaccinated and boosted.
And can you talk about how these CDC guidelines compare to the guidelines from other countries? I've heard that just Canada up north, it's a way different situation.
Yeah, I think it's different place to place, and people, public health officials, I think, have to make the decisions based on their local situation. What are the vaccines available? What is the vaccination status of their population? And, what they're seeing currently as far as hospitalization, positive rates, things like that. So I think that it is a very individual situation from kind of location to location, and there are differences, definitely. These are decisions made based looking at the data in the U.S., and they certainly may change over time as we learn more, but it's different on the ground in every place. in large part due to differences in levels of vaccination.
And on being vaccinated, what's the impact of how long ago a person was fully vaccinated when it comes to these isolation times?
So, if you were vaccinated with the mRNA vaccines, the Pfizer, Moderna, over 6 months ago, so you become eligible for the booster, once you've been vaccinated over 6 months ago. So if you have not been boosted, even though you received those vaccines over 6 months ago, or J&J over 2 months ago and are not boosted, then you in these guidelines are, following the same suggestions of people who are unvaccinated. So it's stay at home for if exposed, then to quarantine or stay at home for 5 days. And after that, mask around others for 5 additional days and test on day 5, if possible, and ideally test on day 5.
Okay. Well, since this is so confusing, can you repeat the guidelines in case anyone listening missed them the first time?
Yes. So I think the take-home message is that isolate if you test positive for COVID-19, that everyone, regardless of vaccination status, is being suggested to isolate, stay home for 5 days if you are asymptomatic or your symptoms are truly resolving. So you don't have any fever, haven't had a fever, for instance, for at least 24 hours. So no symptoms, symptoms really resolving, then you can leave your house after 5 days. But it's important to continue wearing a mask for an additional 5 days. The differences come based on vaccination status when we're talking about quarantine, which is when you've been exposed to someone with COVID-19. So if you have been boosted or if you've completed the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine recently, so within 6 months, or the J&J vaccine, you've received it recently within 2 months, then you actually can wear a mask around others for 10 days, so without quarantine. So it's important to wear that mask around others and to test on day 5, ideally, but you actually do not have to quarantine if you've been boosted or recently vaccinated. If you have not been boosted, but you're eligible for a booster, so you've completed the Pfizer, Moderna in over 6 months ago and have not been boosted, or the J&J over 2 months ago and have not been boosted, or you're not vaccinated, then you do need to quarantine following exposure to someone with COVID-19, which means staying home for 5 days, and after that, wearing a mask for an additional 5 days, and testing again, ideally on day 5, if possible.
Whew. Well done. Nemanje Bumpus is the director of the Department of Pharmacology and Molecular Sciences at Johns Hopkins University. Nemanje, thank you for coming on and doing that heavy lift.
Thank you for having me.
The Takeaway is supported by Indeed with Instant Match, a hiring tool instantly delivering to businesses a list of candidates whose resume on Indeed match the job description. Learn more at Indeed.com/credit. Noom is here for people, providing information about how we can all stay well, physically, mentally, and emotionally, by offering support and guidance to navigate a healthy lifestyle with new challenges. More at Noom.com.
And by BetterHelp Online Counseling. BetterHelp, connecting people with a therapist in a private online environment for issues like depression, anxiety, and relationships. 17,000 therapists are available through BetterHelp using a computer or smartphone. Learn more at betterhelp.com/public.
Supporting WHYY, the Philadelphia Museum of Art's Holidays at the Museum, now through January 2nd with extended hours. Visitors can see treasures at every turn, enjoy art, food, and shopping. Timed tickets available at philamuseum.org.
Your investment in WHYY before December 31st will pay off with a new year of stories that bring us together through a richer understanding of the world and conversations that challenge and inspire us. Give today at WHYY.org, and thanks.
This is The Takeaway with Melissa Harris Perry.
I'm Alana Casanova Burgess in for Melissa Harris Perry this week, and actually she's back with you all tomorrow. If you're one of the more than 35 million student loan borrowers in this country who haven't made a payment since March 2020, this one's for you. Last week, President Joe Biden once again extended the moratorium suspending student loan repayments, this time through the end of April. Another 4 months, potentially saving an extra $400 or $500 a month sounds like a good deal, right? But those against any student debt collection say this only postpones the financial hardship of repayments, a hardship shown to disproportionately impact Black student loan borrowers. Compared to their white peers, they often owe 50% more in debt, are almost 25% more likely to have a balance higher than their original loan, and are less likely to deduct complete interest payments on their taxes. On average, white college grads have 7 times more wealth. The pause on repayments was always intended to end eventually. It was originally set to expire back in September, then in August. It was extended through January of the new year. Now debt collection is pushed back again, with repayments planned to start May 1st.
The smooth transition back into repayment is a high priority for the administration.
But progressive politicians, advocates, and academics believe if the burden of loans can be continuously delayed, surely they can be canceled altogether. They say canceling student loan debt could increase the U.S. GDP by more than $173 billion. For more on this, I spoke with Andre Perry, senior fellow at Brookings Metro, who says this boost to the economy would be a key step in fulfilling Biden's promise to increase Black wealth in this country and narrow the racial wealth gap.
The timing is a little curious, to say the least. I don't think it's a coincidence that the administration announced that they were going to extend after Manchin made his announcement. And the reason given is that they needed to get a handle on the pandemic, which is certainly true. The economy is still tenuous at best, and so that makes sense. But clearly, everyone sees that the Biden administration needed to respond to progressives who are growing more and more impatient with not seeing their agenda come to fruition. So it's disheartening, to say the least, because Biden ran on the promise that he would cancel at least $10,000 of student debt.
So what's going on?
So for me, I say this: racism doesn't always show up with tiki torches and racial epithets.